Thank you. Thank you all for coming to the session. So we're going to be talking now about the hidden cost of transformation. And this was really, it came about through thinking we're in a world, a digital world, a technology world, which is defined by constant change, really. And that means that leadership is being tested in new and often quite complicated ways. But what's often overlooked and what we don't really talk about is the human cost of driving transformation. So today, what we wanted to do is shine a light really on the emotional and the psychological and the cultural dimensions that shape resilience and ultimately the success of our teams. So over the next 40 minutes, we're going to uncover some of the things that leaders tend not to talk about, so the invisible things, the invisible pressures, moments of stress and uncertainty, and those things can derail even the best of us, can't they? So that's what we'll be talking about. We're going to touch on a number of themes across the panel. We will explore how clarity of purpose and self-care and psychological safety and trust within a team can really help to keep the leaders grounded, as well as helping to build that high-performing team and keep them cohesive and performing. And we've got a great panel. Thank you all for joining me today. So you bring a real wealth of experience across these topics. I know you've got some personal stories and some practical strategies as well. So I think we'll start by introducing the panel. So we'll start with you, Leatham.
And thank you, Helen, and great to see you all. I'm Leatham Green. I'm the Executive Director of Transformation for the public sector at Oracle.
I'm Juliet Alban-Metcalf. I'm Chief Executive of a company called Real World Group, and we're organizational psychologists, and we help organizations to create the right culture and leadership so that any kind of transformation works rather than fails.
Keep that.
My name is Denise Ray-Murray, and I'm the VP for HR Business Process Optimization with DHL Supply Chain globally.
Hi, good morning. My name is Gan Vasani. I'm an NED, ERP strategic advisor, and currently a program director for a defense company.
Thank you. So I'm going to come to the first theme that I wanted to touch on today, which is purpose-driven leadership. So thinking about how having a clarity of purpose can keep you grounded when things feel chaotic, which sometimes they do. I'm going to start with you, Leatham, to touch on this, if that's okay.
Thank you. I mean, it's a great subject to be talking about in terms of digital transformation. And what I see when I kind of work with organizations across the country is the technology, of course, whilst it is complicated, is not really the reason why organizations don't get the maximum value and impact from their investment. But it's down to people and behavior. And often the lack of clarity of purpose, which kind of sounds quite simple, doesn't it? Like, why aren't we clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it? But answering that why question is really quite challenging for organizations, because often we want to plunge into the what and the how because they're far easier to answer. But spending time really understanding the why and the purpose behind why you're choosing to invest in digital transformation is fundamentally important. Because clarification of purpose provides that direction of clarity, and confused people tend not to do anything, and they kind of then get stuck in inertia. Mm-hmm. And also it creates quite chaotic environments as well. And in chaos, you're not going to get innovation and creativity, and also creating that kind of underpinning psychological safety for individuals to thrive and maximize. Because this stuff is really difficult. Delivering digital transformation, investing in new technology is tricky stuff. It is emotional stuff. It's trying to get the organizations to move and shift their mindset and behavior. All takes a lot of effort. And often people will say to me, well, this is really difficult, Ethan. And yes, it is. And it's relentless. And therefore, leaders have got to be able to tell and share that compelling vision of the future, provide hope and optimism for where they're going. And that clarity also provides the ability to kind of move forward collectively, because it's what gets you out of bed in the morning, isn't it? I don't get out of bed in the morning to be part of digital transformation. I mean, I might get excited about it because it's my day job, but really I might get out of bed in the morning if it's about removing or eliminating child poverty, or connecting people who are living in isolated environments and communities to have a better life. And we heard some of that this morning from the Vodafone presentation, which is about the investment that they're making to try and connect isolated communities and individuals, a clear purpose and direction of travel. And that's what we kind of got to be able to elevate really clearly. But then that also takes time. And looking at the agenda of organizations when we come to this type of work, how much time is allocated to this kind of conversation? Generally not sufficient, so we've got to encourage that kind of movement. And it also provides with better decision making, because if I'm clear of my purpose, and I'm clear of the direction of travel, all of my decision making should be put towards delivering that. And if it's not going to help with that, then of course there's a conversation to be had in terms of what do we do about this stuff. And also, it provides you with the ability to move away from pushing your colleagues and people in a direction and kind of moving towards aligning them, because they'll want to follow you, however difficult that is, if you're clear about purpose. I could go on for about a while, but I think that's probably it for the time being. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. So I think having a purpose is the foundation for a transformational program. But the other thing that's really important, and I'm going to ask you about this, Denise, is having the psychological safety and the trust within the team, so that you've got a culture where people can be honest and they're not afraid to speak up when they're under pressure. Can you talk to us about your experience of that?
Yeah, so I lead multinational teams across geographies in Asia, the US, the UK, and we work remotely primarily, actually, and we deliver transformation to a global business primarily remotely. So actually this is the fundamental part of why we're a successful team. I think it sounds really boring, but it starts with the leader, always. You create psychological safety by not knowing all of the answers and by making it okay not to know all of the answers. Lethan was talking about vision and purpose, which is absolutely your North Star. But sometimes when it comes down to the more technical stuff, you're kind of figuring that out together as a team. So a lot of the time it's me that's the person who says, I don't know the answer to that. How do we get to the answer? Who do we need to engage to get to the answer? Where do we look to get to the answer? And I think then by role modelling effectively that it's okay not to know, that's probably the primary part of creating a culture within your team that enables people to feel psychologically safe. There is something to be said as well about accountability. So when I talk about accountability for mistakes, I talk about my accountability for mistakes. I might talk privately or one-on-one with my team members or my project members about their individual accountabilities, but never at a more public level. And I think that also helps to create that sense of safety in a team if they have a leader that they believe is putting their welfare first. We also speak quite a lot within my team about not necessarily needing to be an expert in every area, but you need to understand the overall that you're trying to deliver. And I was talking last night actually about a phrase that I hold dear, which is, if you cannot explain your job to a 7-year-old, then you don't have a real job. And I apply that to these huge transformation projects as well. If you cannot, and every member of your team cannot explain this to people who are not technical, who are not up to their armpits in what does transformation really mean, if you can't explain that in a way that is digestible, relatable, and engaging, then you don't understand it yourself and you're destined to fail. So that's probably what I would say about leadership in your role, creating psychological safety by making it okay not to know the answer, but not making it okay not to try and figure it out. Accountability and lines of accountability, and then finally your own understanding, buy-in and ability to speak with authority about why you're doing and how you're doing the transformative actions in your business.
I think there's a lot of strength in vulnerability there that you talked about, and often that's seen as a weakness. So it's nice to recognise that that's actually a strength.
And that can be quite hard, and that's why I mentioned the multicultural elements of the team as well, because when you are working across different cultures and personality types, that does feel you feel very vulnerable, and some people feel very vulnerable not being the expert or not having the knowledge and admitting that they don't have the knowledge. And that's why I think that at a leadership level, it's absolutely your job to say, oh, I don't know the answer. Or to say, let me play that back to make sure that I have understood, knowing that there's at least one or two people that are in the room alongside you who definitely haven't understood, and using that language that is accessible, inclusive, and yeah, just available for people.
Brilliant. Thank you. The next thing I would like to talk about just raised some eyebrows as I was talking to my own company about what we'd be saying today, is the concept of self-care as a strategy, which, you know, people chuckle about that, but it's really important. I'm looking at you, Glenn, because I'm going to come to you. It's really important to look after yourself as a leader in order to get the best from your team and to keep everyone on track, isn't it? Can you talk to that for us?
Yeah, and it's really good to be talking about this because it doesn't often get that attention and airtime. So for me, my wellness as a leader is often influenced by my team wellness and also the organization that we tend to operate in. And if I just talk a bit more about my team that I'm working with now, I'm being quite open. They're a mixed group of people, some of them going through the usual life pressures that you would expect, financial pressures, organizations are changing, so there's a lot of redundancies happening around now. There's a few of them going through divorces, financial hardship, etc., etc. And at a particular age, some of them also got other pressures outside of work, such as caring for their parents or relatives and so on. So the reason why I say this is they come to work, and transformation programs often demand the best individuals and the best out of those individuals. And so layer on a transformation program on top of whatever may be going on in terms of those individuals is a real sensitive and dynamic challenge. And so how do we go about doing that? There's the spirit of openness. And often, as a leader, when I walk into the office and we go in terms of hybrid working, body language and my expression and my positivity is an anchor for how others tend to feel and behave. So being mindful of that is really, really important for me as well. The other aspect of wellness in a challenging transformation program is convincing the board that, one, this is important, and the second, and really, really challenging, is getting funding for wellness initiatives within a program. These types of programs, and I'm doing an ERP, Oracle transformation at the moment, they don't have rest breaks. They move from one type of phase straight onto the other, and convincing the board that this is quite key. Even these days, having a Christmas event is not to be taken for granted. And I certainly know large organizations that have cancelled Christmas. Now, that could be fine for those large organizations, but then what's the plan B? What's the plan C? It's to get people together, being open and being positive and supportive in as many ways as possible. And that really, really is a delicate art. And from a leader like myself, when I'm managing the team, one, it's going into the office and demonstrating that. Secondly, it's being open. And thirdly, in terms of an all-hands monthly meeting, it's really driving and prioritizing wellness aspects into the agenda. And it's amazing when I speak in front of my team on these monthly sessions that it's the wellness topic that is different, and that's what resonates and that's what lands. And that, I feel, is something that needs to be expanded on. I wish it could go as strong as perhaps a sort of yoga session, but that just won't land within the corporate environment I'm in. But it's being creative and just making sure it's at least spoken about. And so that is a constant challenge, but it needs that constant attention at the same time.
Thank you. I'm going to come to you, Leatham, as well on this, because you've worked with lots of organisations, especially in the public sector. I wanted to ask you how you have seen them make space for things like well-being, where people often roll their eyes, don't they, when you talk about well-being. But how do you do that when the pace is really fast?
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting one, isn't it? Because theoretically, people get it. and understand it, and certainly in the public sector, I can't think of any organization that won't have a policy about it. But there's a very, my grandmother used to say to me, fine words, but to know parsnips, how I them, yeah? So you've got to do something positive with action. In this kind of world, it very rarely appears as a feature, if ever. And this is fundamentally important to shift. If we're going to shift one thing, this is where we need to shift it. Because there's got to be clarity of thought. Without well-being, unless the leaders are well, fit, and healthy, you're not going to make better decisions, the right decisions, the most effective decisions, tough decisions. So there's got to be time set aside for it. There's got to be budget allocated to it. And it's got to be all right to do yoga if that's what's required. I'm not saying it is. So you've got these kind of programs out there in the field. But sometimes, again, are they the right things to be doing? So that's often a challenge that I'll bring to the organization. You're investing money in this because it might be the current trend to do. But have you asked those individuals in the business what's important to them? What will make their well-being better? And have we got a variety, a diverse access to it? And am I given permission to it? So my first employer, this was in 1984 when I left university, was working with Scottish and Newcastle breweries. And I arrived in the hotel my first day, and the manager said to me, he's called Steve Whittle, we've organized for you to do a meditation 6-week program. And of course, I'm a people pleaser, so I just said, fine. I didn't really know what meditation was, I think, in 1984. And it was a 6-week program that they put us on. Now, everybody in the hotel was given access to this. They believed in it. The 2 managers believed in it. Scottish and Newcastle breweries didn't, and they didn't allocate money to it. But it was carved out from within the hotel's budget. Now, that fundamentally shifted and changed my life, because I've been a lifelong meditator since then. But those people who didn't want to meditate were permitted to have 20 minutes break, additional break every day to do whatever they wanted. Now that might have been walk along the seafront and having some great sea air, or it might have been having an extra cigarette break at the time because lots of people smoked still in 1984. But the question was that those 2 individuals who managed the hotel had the insight. So in this high pressurized environment of hospitality, having the ability to have clarity of thought to enable you then to put the customer at the center of why we're here in the hotel. And in that space, our purpose was to create magic for everyone who walked through the door. And that's what we would check in with every day for 10 minutes. What magic have you created today? And what magic will you create? Now, I don't necessarily see that clarity of well-being connected into public sector. So that's always my kind of challenge back to the organizations when they're doing it. Why are you doing it? And what does better look like? Because sickness absence levels are probably not falling for the investment that's putting in. So is this the right thing that's being done? Yeah?
Yeah, that's a great point. Of course, yeah.
I want to just add something about the employee perspective as well, because I think I absolutely agree with my colleagues about the importance of leaders taking care of themselves. And people often use the analogy, when you're in an aeroplane and they sort of say to you, if the oxygen mask's full, you must put your own first. And it's not to say that we need to be selfish as leaders, because selfish leadership is the worst kind of leadership, as we'll know from our own experience, right? But when you're well as a leader, it creates a space as well for you to take care of your people. And the biggest predictor of motivation, satisfaction, commitment, reduced job-related stress as well among people when they're going through transformation, when they're going through the everyday pressures of life and work and demands and all those things, is when the leader shows genuine concern for them. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a program, doesn't necessarily need to be yoga or meditation. All those things can be really, really powerful. And if they're what people want, then they will have a really great effect, obviously, because, by definition. But it doesn't have to be a program. It's that everyday behavior. It's that checking in with people. It's about making sure that not every conversation that you have as a leader is about the task at hand. It's about making sure that you're asking about people as human beings, saying genuinely, how are you? How's your week gone? What's working? What's happening for you at the moment? What's pressurizing you? What can I support you with? That dimension that we call showing genuine concern in our 360 tools is the most powerful thing to do. And that is all about wellness, and that's how you then translate that wellness to your employees.
About empathy and understanding your team. Thank you. So Denise, I'm going to come back to you. We're talking about leading through complexity, and it's fair to say your organisation is large and complex. So what are some of the tools that you have used to find the sort of calm through the chaos, if we can call it chaos?
Gosh, that's a really good question. In terms of complexity, I think that you can better your chances, like I said, by having a really clear why are we doing this in the first place. It's very difficult when you're trying to come in later on and then define why you're doing the thing that you're doing. I've led massive programmes where I've got quite a recent example where halfway through the programme you think everything's going swimmingly well, and then a whole load of issues pop their head up at once, and actually they're across multiple work streams and multiple people are putting their hands up with a white flag in it and saying, you know, this is it. So as a leader, your job then is to get underneath of the complexity and to sort out what is truly a barrier and what do I truly need to sort out and what actually can we just remove from people. A lot of my conversations as a leader in transformation are, why are you doing that? Do you really need to do that? Can we take that thing out? How much time have you already invested in it? How much further time do you have to invest in it to get it to a conclusion? And does that make sense for where we are? So the complexity, these programs are large, they are complex, but I think sometimes human behaviours add to that complexity. And my role is to say, right, is this being driven by a true need? Is it being driven by a personal want? Or is it being driven by a lack of clarity? If it's a true need, we all get behind it. We say, who else do we need to bring in? How do we work our way through this? If it's a personal want, it comes back to what will it deliver? How long will it take you to deliver? And truly, do you know, is it the right thing to do organisationally and personally? And other than that, it shouldn't be within the scope, and we're adding our own complexity in there. So my tools are truly to understand, firstly, what is driving the complexity, and then help my team to work out either the path through or to just, sometimes it's stop what you're doing. Sometimes it is the thing that you're doing is complex because it's not the right thing, or it's not the right thing at this time. And that comes back to that psychological safety, that vulnerability. You know, you need to be able to say, I don't know if this is the right thing anymore. And, you know, let's do a good old, you know, pros and cons, what will it deliver, what will it take list. And the what will it take, you also need to talk about what it will take personally and for your team. What will it take to deliver it? Is it worth that investment of their emotional well-being, their time, their resources?
That's a really good point, isn't it? I think the human cost of the change and what we're doing. What does the transformation actually do to you as a leader? Come back to you.
I'm victimised. It depends. I think earlier in my career, when I was first leading these big programs, the toll was really large. You know, I was learning myself how to keep well. And for me, keeping well is a whole multitude of things. But as I have led through these, my example of not doing so well, what the toll that it took on me as a leader was almost burnout. You know, overextending, both from a mental capacity and emotional investment and time. It was an almost burnout situation. Luckily, I have a really supportive friend group and wife, and they were able to say to me, we can see what's happening here and you need to take a step now before it actually happens. So I had a bit of an intervention, I suppose, by people who love me and care about me. And since then, I've been very intentional about how much I give of myself. I think to be an authentic leader, you need to believe in it and you need to give something of yourself personally. But to be a good leader, you need to be, again, role modelling that there are limits to that. You know, so there are some non-negotiables for me. I must get daylight. I have to get daylight. I live in Scotland, right? And it's even worse. I'm in the west of Scotland, so in the winter and particularly, daylight hours are 9 till 3. Peak business hours. So I need to get outside, even just for half an hour. I have a dog because that's one of the things that forces me to get outside. That's a non-negotiable. Every day I have to be outside. Another non-negotiable for me is, unless the world is on fire, I am not working a Sunday. I work in HR. You know, you have to keep a level of reality here. I am literally not saving people's lives. So whatever it is that's eating into my personal time, my time to switch off, I'm very intentional about that these days, and I ensure that my team are very intentional about it as well. We just worked a weekend. That weekend there passed. That's the first weekend that we have worked in, I don't know, a year perhaps, because it truly was a, do we need to extend ourselves this weekend? Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. But I can see Garn nodding along. I was going to ask you, how do you approach this?
Just building on what Denise said, it's recognizing signs when your threshold is becoming very, very low and you're reaching that critical point. I'm always sensitive to myself and my team in recognizing those signs and then being able to respond to it. I would identify it for myself and also put it out to the audience. Do you know what your release triggers are? So when you're becoming anxious, when you're getting to that 80, 90%, for me, that's time when I need to shut down and go for a run or carve out some time for the family or whatever it may be. And towards the end of the day, I'd love to say to you all I'm a great yoga or meditator, but I'm not. I'm far too wired for that. But just to spend a minute of breathing, which is quite easy to do, really helps myself in terms of managing myself as a leader. So it's really knowing what works for individuals, and it doesn't have to be a run. It could be a walk. It could be reading a book. But it's protecting those release triggers and knowing what they are, when to trigger them, and when to protect them. Because often when you're really, really busy, it's the time to compromise on your release triggers and actually you skip things. You skip going to the gym because you don't have time. And then you end up really getting to that high pressure point, a bit like an engine, which is running at hyper performance. It's revving at a very, very high level for a sustained amount of time. And then you can imagine what happens. Temperature goes up and you end up with this whole cocktail of anxiety and stress and pressure, and it needs an outlet. And so I think for me, it's really recognizing and protecting that.
And it sounds like, I mean, Leatham, you had a great introduction to this world. In 1984, doing meditation, that's quite out there, isn't it? But I'm wondering whether you started out like this or whether you learnt some tough lessons along the way, Garn. We've heard from Denise, almost burning out, and thankfully not.
Did I start out like this? Not really. Learning through the decades as I progressed through the career. It's evolving and learning, but Helen, ultimately, especially for transformation teams, it does require a certain type of individual. And when I'm interviewing certain candidates, when I'm building those teams, it's recognizing a personality character set, as well as their skills and experience. Who do we actually feel would last and make it? Because the last thing you want to do is to break people. And transformation programs, the reality is it breaks people down, and hopefully some of them bounce back, but some of them don't. And so it's really understanding what type of person lends itself to those types of environments. It's not something you quite say in an interview. How resilient are you, or how do you manage your wellness? And for me, a lot of this comes through in their positivity, in their body language, much harder to recognize. And that's why, from experience, I do tend to go back to the same people. So I've got a network of people that I do depend on, and it's those people that often will be my direct reports, which would also cascade that leadership and that leadership style in prioritizing wellness, which isn't always present, and it shouldn't be taken for granted elsewhere.
Thank you. That's great. I wanted to come back to the concept of a high-performing team now, and I'm going to ask you about this, Juliette. So leadership, the energy that you bring to that really directly affects the team. And I wanted to ask about your experience, particularly, I think, in light of yesterday's keynote, which was all about ambition. So how do you balance really ambitious goals with care?
So, one of the things that is key about leading change successfully is working out how to get your team involved. So a bit like Denise was saying earlier on about, knowing that you haven't got to have all the answers can be really liberating for leaders, and is really important because people really want to contribute their thoughts and ideas and suggestions to things. They want to have a sense of purpose. They need to be connected to the outcome, as Lethan was saying. So they need to understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, but they also need to build themselves into it. Now, that is part of the answer to, how do we, achieve high-performing things, complex things, in ways that, are sustained. And basically, what you want to think about is helping to simplify, first of all, what is the goal that we're going for, understanding what that's all about, and then explaining to people what is critical about what we achieve. So, basically, we use this acronym often called CIA, which it's useful to remember as an acronym, but you actually use it the other way around. So when you're looking to achieve something particularly complex and demanding, or that, when people are already burnt out, they're feeling like, not another thing to deal with, is first of all, as a leader, perhaps you might need to do this on your own or with more other senior people in the organization, or perhaps you can do it with your team to a degree. The first question to ask yourself is, what is it, you start off with the A, what is it we have to accept about this situation? What are the absolute non-negotiables? What's the reality? We have to be honest with people. If we're going to take care of people, we can't BS them. Don't know if there's a polite word for that. We can't, tell fibs or, try to pretend things are going to be easy or okay. So we start with that. What is it that are non-negotiables? But also we have to question our own assumptions about what we think is required of us. What do we think we can't question? So we start doing that first of all, and then we invite people's ideas and their suggestions. And people, it's unfortunate. We so often work with teams where people say, well, look, bottom line is a lot of people just come to work to do a job. A lot of people are they're not really interested in taking part, contributing and stuff. So let's just let them do that. Let's just, but they're making a huge assumption about people on the basis of poor data or no data. They've just made these assumptions based on how people have behaved in the past. The thing about leadership is to be always seeking feedback and always asking yourself, actually, how well do I know the situation? How well do I know how I'm landing? How well do I know what my people need from me? So you might surprise yourself if you're not somebody who typically gets others involved in change and coming up with ideas and suggestions about how we'll implement things. But if you do it, chances are some people, at least, if not everybody, will surprise you. If you're genuinely open to their ideas and suggestions. So the next bit is then what you're doing is you're creating the other conditions that are important. People want a sense of autonomy over their lives. We all want a sense of control. And by inviting people to help create a vision, even just at a project level, helps them feel a sense of that more over their lives. It's also about inviting them, to, wherever possible, to join in decision making, if it's appropriate. And often it will be, that they can say, actually, no, well, we don't need to do it that way, or we shouldn't do it that way, but let's do it this way. So the ideas and suggestions provides them with a sense of autonomy. And then, when you've genuinely helped people to build themselves into the future, they've sort of said, this is what I think, and this is what I would enjoy doing in this. And, you might say, well, there's also these non-negotiables you're going to have to achieve as well, but we can be flexible on this. When you've done those two things, then what will happen is people will change in the direction that you need them to. They will implement the complexity. They will get on board with things that, otherwise felt insurmountable. But basically, that's kind of the key, thinking about what do we have to accept? How can I encourage people to, and be honest about, how can I encourage people to get involved in thinking about ways of doing it successfully? And then they will, be truly engaged in making it happen.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really useful. It's made me think, from my own perspective, we're a digital transformation consultancy, and I know that these programs are really long. Actually, I'm going to look again to you, Denise. I'm going to pick on you again. How do you keep motivating the team when it's such a long process that you're going through? How do you keep them motivated and cohesive?
I think there's a few tools in my armoury in that. One is the look back. Where have we come from? How far have we come? Let's look at all the hard things that we've already achieved. One is the where are we right now? You know, so in a programme, where are we right now, and what do we need to tell ourselves about that? And the other one's to look forward, obviously, like what is it that we're aiming towards? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And I do that on a loop with my team, but also. It's not a strict answer to your question, but it's more a continuation of the other one. It's also about looking at our continuous improvement methodology. So my entire function within our organisation exists for continuous improvement. A huge part of that is being able to identify and admit where you have failed. And actually, I think that the success of a transformation is more dependent on how you deal with the failures throughout that transformation, because there are and will be, you know, bits where you miss the mark or you get it wrong, or, you know, you get to the end and you go, I didn't quite deliver what I said it would deliver. Now we need to go back a bit, or we need to rework something. So we spend a lot of time celebrating our success, taking time to recognise what do we do well, have we done well, and how do we make that repeatable. And we also spend a significant period on lessons learned. So within every transformation programme, I don't do a lessons learned at the end. I do a lessons learned at the end of every phase within the programme. So, you know, your design phase, lesson learned. Your build phase, lesson learned. Because actually they're fresh in people's minds. And a lot of those lessons you can apply to the next stages. If you wait to the end of your programme, yeah, you can apply them to your next large transformation. But that lesson learned mentality, again, that's about vulnerability. It's about trust. It's about me as a leader saying, actually, now I'm reflecting, I got this bit wrong. You know, my first large transformation project, I got a load of feedback at the end because I didn't ask for it until the end about communication, about the progress against the plan, about the purpose, about what we were delivering for the business. Cut like a knife. But what did it do? It caused me a moment of immediate and very real self-reflection. And it caused an immediate and very real change to how I approach these programmes, what my visibility is, how visible I am with the rest of the team, making sure I'm having skip levels and talking to all of the project members, not just the leaders within that project. So those things, I think, are really important tools for driving that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Vulnerability comes up a lot, and honesty, and really engaging with everyone and reflecting. I think that's really important.
Authenticity is what I think it is. You know, you have to be authentic, and to be authentic, you have to be vulnerable, because there's parts of you that people might not like.
There's parts of us that we ourselves don't like, I'm sure. I think it's really important because we're all here, we're talking about digital transformation, it's all about technology. But ultimately, it comes back to why are we using that technology? And it's to try and make people's jobs and lives easier, to make them more efficient. And we talk about AI a lot, especially in the Oracle ecosystem. AI is huge. And I read a quote recently, and I'm going to misquote it, but it was basically saying, AI is the computer. Let the computer do the computing, and let's spend more time being human. And that's really important. And I think that's what this is all about, really, isn't it? Is considering the humans in the team, having honest conversations, and using that to help motivate and keep them going.
None of us have mentioned any of the technology really that they're working with or that we're implementing, because actually that's the supplement, that's the underpinning. It's not the North Star, it's not the motivation, and it's not the key indicator of success either.
No, that's true. I'm conscious of time, so I have one last question, really, for all of you. I'll start with you, Lethem. In your experience of lots and lots of transformation, what has surprised you the most?
Oh, gosh, just one thing. What surprised me most? What continues to surprise me is the challenge that I have to bring people at the center of the conversation. Because organizations still want to plunge into the what and the how and the program timeline. But, you know, technology accelerates change, but it's people which are the powerhouse about delivering the impact and value. And ignore that at your peril, because this is the primary driver of where we've got to focus our attention. And people are big emotional, squidgy, complex creatures, unique and individual and fabulous. But collectively, that can be quite challenging because I just want to drive this through. And if you ignore it, you're never going to get the best out of the investment that you want because you require those people to adopt the change that you're trying to bring into the organization. And they can only do that if they've got clarity of purpose, because that helps kind of break through the noise. And that is still kind of a big gap that I see in programs. So that's probably my continued surprise. It might be something about failure to be able to convince people why they need to commit this time. But I continue at least to kind of learn from my feedback and how I can make it better. But that's the urge that I would say you've got to put that front and center and the top of the agenda.
Thank you.
Mine's similar to yours, actually, Lethem. It's how many people, leaders in organisations, starting at board level, think that we'll change the structures and processes, we'll sell the benefits, and people will naturally follow. But actually, as Lethem has said, that's the wrong way. That's wrong, the wrong way around. And added to that, I would say, does it surprise me? I'm not sure if it surprises me. It frustrates me more than surprises me. Is how many senior leaders don't realise that they're the problem. They think it's about employee resistance. They don't realise actually their behaviour is not helping the situation. It's making it worse because they're not role modelling, listening, consulting, taking care of people. All the providing autonomy, having positive expectations, all those things that they want other leaders to do to smooth the path. They're not prepared to do it themselves because they either think that they're perfect or they don't think that anyone notices their behaviour. So it's the bit that they don't realise if they just were prepared to reflect, they could solve so many more issues.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
I'm surprised with every transformational programme that I do, and it's a different thing every time, and that in itself is the surprising thing. Just when I think I've got it nailed, something else happens in the next programme. Another lesson learned happens, another continuous improvement opportunity, as I try to frame it in my own mind, pops up. You find something you've missed, you find something that didn't happen before, and that is the most surprising thing about it. Transformation's never done. Right, you don't transform and then you're like, oh, that's nice. Thank God, or I'd be out of a job, right? But you don't have it ever done, and there's always something else coming along. There's always something. You put the foundational elements in, and then bang, you've got AI coming in on top of it. How do you make those even better using AI? Or you transform your organisation, and then you hit an economic headwind, and all of a sudden you need to deliver more with less. You get my own personal experience, you get a new global CEO of the group who sets our strategy at doubling the size of our business in the next 5 years. Those types of things are continual challenges, and I think that's the thing that always surprises me, is just when you think you've got it nailed, a new challenge comes along. Luckily, I find that motivational, so hopefully I'd pass Gan's recruitment test about the type of person that should be involved in this. But yeah, I think that's the surprising thing, is that there's a new challenge every time.
Brilliant, thank you.
The biggest surprise and challenge for me is investment. Often the business case will drive the timeline and the cost of large programs, and there's always pressure from often above about why does a program take so long. So I'm doing a 5-country rollout at the moment, with Australia going live in 2027, and the Australia board are saying we can't wait that long, can we do it sooner? And it's that pace that then drives the team to work harder. We've spoken a few points and moments around burnouts, and it's do things quicker. Why does it take so long? It's just implementing technology. Another question I got asked only last week is why there's so many testers in the team. Can't we have half the number, for example? And it's these types of behaviours driven from funding, which will ultimately drive people to work harder, and in some cases burnout. So it's that duration, it's the investment, it's the number of people in your team, that I feel needs to be protected, but I'm always surprised that these types of transformation programs, they do take a certain amount of time, a certain amount of people, but the pressures are, can you do it quicker and faster? And there's a consequence to that as well.
Super. Thank you. Thank you all. That was really interesting. I hope you all found it useful. Something slightly offbeat about the discussion in a technology conference, perhaps. I think continuing the theme, once we leave here, you're all welcome to visit the De Novo stand. We're stand A5. And breaking with the technology trend, we've got 2 of the rescue dogs from the Search and Rescue Dogs Association of Wales there. So if you want to come and de-stress and pet a dog and carry on the conversation that we've been having, please come and do that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.